Good evening. Good evening. My name is Frankie Camille. This is the video documentary just highlighting a few aspects of the two lessons that were taught. The students that were used were Miyoshi and Tajanique, and the lessons were prepared for mainly grade 10 students, grade 10 and grade 11 students. Okay, the first lesson that I taught was an introduction to the orchestra, and that spoke, the objectives for that was to define what an orchestra is, um, and to identify the four family groups, and also to distinguish between the different sounds of the instruments. That was the first lesson. The second lesson was about music versus noise, an introduction to music in a more philosophical way, and in a more deeper understanding of what music is. And so the objectives for that one was students will be able to tell the difference between what music is versus noise, so they'll be able to distinguish or define the term music versus what is not music. Also, to identify the elements, dynamics. They were introduced to dynamics. They'll be able to identify elements of dynamics in the music, and also to create rhythm using their hands. That was the objective for the second lesson. Just a bit of highlight in terms of the second lesson. I don't think we made it as far as the third objectives for that lesson. Okay, and so the literacy strategies that I chose to use for the first lesson was closed-ended, and where the students they were given a list of words, and they were given the category of instruments, and what they had to do was they had to put the words in the different categories, which would help me as a teacher to understand if they really got the concept, and it helped them to really be able to think in terms of similarities, differences, so it opened up their minds into more critical thinking, rather than simply memory. Okay, so it's a higher level in terms of the Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so that's what they had to do for that. The second strategy that I used for the second lesson that I taught was a reading response journal. However, because of my content area, I wouldn't call it reading response, but it's more listening response journal, whereas they had to listen to the song For Release by Beethoven, and after listening to the song, they had to describe how the song made them feel, what they believed that the composer was going through at the time when he wrote the song, and then they had to imagine that they themselves were creating a song, and they had to say what type of emotions, what type of message would they try to convey in the song. Okay, and so they're the two strategies that I chose to use for my two lessons. My observations for lesson one, in terms of identifying the different sounds of the instrument. My two students, although I use fellow classmates, they were very knowledgeable. They were knowledgeable in some aspects, so they were not completely um, um, completely lost in terms of understanding the instruments. Um, they were they were well engaged. Um, so there was no point in the lesson where they were like, I'm bored, or they started to drift away. Um, from the lesson started up to when the lesson ended, they were very much engaged, very much interested in what was going on, and I felt as if they too learned a thing or two, particularly in terms of the piano, which is classified as a string instrument as well as a percussion instrument. And so they learn various aspects of that in terms of music. They learned some history in terms of what the piano, the name of piano forte, and so they they were able to get something from the lesson, although themselves were not senior high school students. So, which really goes to show that when you're preparing a lesson, you have to be mindful that the people that you're teaching, although you may believe that they have prior knowledge or they know certain things, there's always some new information um, there to teach. And not it's not so much the information, but it's also the way that you present the information. So sometimes persons may know something, or they may have been taught it one way, and then when you teach it, you open up a new perspective, a new understanding, and they get to understand them, understand the concept a bit better, or understand it from a different perspective. All right, so that's something I learned from my observation, is that never take for granted um, what your students may know, and also never take for granted what your students may not know and what you're teaching. That's why it's very important to really, really plan your lesson so that you could present it in such a way that no matter who it is, from whether they're in grade 1 or grade 12, or even college level, that they'll be able to understand the information that is being taught. And so I found that very encouraging as a future teacher, that I was able to teach a lesson amongst my peers, and they were receptive to it. They learned something, and also that they were respectful, even in the mess in the teaching. They were not rude or disrespectful. They for the most part follow directions and instructions, and so forth and so on. And so that I didn't have to worry about the disciplinarian taking disciplinary action, or cautioning students to behave and all of that, which makes teaching a bit more enjoyable, and um, it makes you obtaining your objectives much easier and clearer, when you don't have to deal with disciplinary and disruptive students um, in the classroom. And that's something that every teacher at some point is going to have to deal with. How do you manage a class properly, class management skills, and so forth and so on. Although it was an online platform, I found that it was still, the information still got through through my students. All right. Uh, so I noticed that behavior. I noticed that they were receptive to the lesson, and I noticed that certain things got their attention, like the 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 the, the videos that were playing. That really got their attention. They got excited about that. The discussion, just the back and forth discussion, They got excited about that. The activities where I had them fill out the close-ended um, close-ended assignment online, and they had to respond to me online, and they had to email me. All of that, it created a special interest in them. They were more interested. um, the interaction was good, and so I've taken note in terms of all of that. All right. Now, in terms of my evaluation of the strategies that were used, I believe the closed-ended strategy is a good strategy to use, because it tests the students, like I said, at a higher level. It's not just about memory or recalling something. It's about them being able now to apply the knowledge that they would have learned, in a meaningful way. And so, the closed-ended, for me, I believe it's a good way to test the knowledge, and also the ability of your students to think critically. Okay. um, the the response journal, or the listening response journal, I find that to be very effective. I was quite impressed, and quite surprised at some of the responses that I got, particularly from Tajanique. She really shocked me in her response, and also Miyoshi. I was very, very, very surprised at the level in which they were able to articulate themselves musically, and articulate the information that were given to them in a musical way, and in a way that me as a music teacher could relate, and could um, could understand, without me having to teach them every single thing. They were able not to take certain aspects of the lesson, and they were able to run with it, and they were able to express themselves. So I find that the reading response journal, or the listening response journal, is a very effective way to get students to really express themselves, in terms of writing, um, in terms of their ability to express themselves, to express different thoughts, not just themselves, but characters. The different characters in the book. Music is a form of art, and it's also a form of literature. And so the same techniques that we may employ in terms of really getting in the mind of the characters, it's the same technique that we will use in terms of getting in the mind of the composer, and trying to find out, okay, what message is being conveyed. Okay. And so, in terms of the sample of their work, I would have emailed that sample to you, Dr. Butler, um, via online, via Teams, and so you would see the work that they would have done, and the grades that they would have received in terms of that. All right. So, in terms of my in terms of the literacy skills of the students that I would have worked with, of course, I chose to work with fellow classmates, and so I would have expected that um, their literacy level would be at a high level, in terms of their ability to read, perceive, understand, and so, but I don't take for I don't take for granted the fact that when I do work with students in the high school system, that their literacy level would be at different stages. Some may be more advanced than others, and some may be struggling, and so forth, and some may not even be able to read. And so it's important then that I be able to find creative ways to assess them. All right, not just in terms of their writing, but I find other ways to assess them to see if they know the information. And so sometimes they may know the information, but they're unable to articulate that information through their writing. They may be able to articulate it very well verbally, but they may not be able to articulate it very well in terms of their of their writing. And so the literacy level of the Nayoshi and Tajanique, of course, at college level. So I expect that they'll be able to read, write, and perceive. But at the same time, if I apply that to the high school system, then um, I'm expecting different levels. I don't expect that every student be able to read and write. Okay. In terms of the relevance of the literacy strategies in the secondary high school, I believe that it's crucial that these type of literacy strategies be used, especially in a high school, because we want to know what level our students are at, and we want to be able to help them to get to the level where they need to be. Okay, for them to would have made it to grade 10, it means then that either one, that they simply were just forced, or they went through the system, uh, you know, just to say that they passed a grade, or they would have worked their way through every grade level, and they've gotten at a certain level. And so I think that at the high school level, these literacy strategies are very relevant and very, very important in building their self-esteem, and building their self-worth, and motivating them. That's part of education too. Must not take for granted that some students, they just need that extra push. They need to be motivated. They need to know that, hey, there's a way for me to understand this. There's a way for me to comprehend, and my teachers are using different strategies to try to get the best out of me. Okay. What I would do differently in terms of the high school level, in terms of implementing these strategies, I think what I would do is I would ensure that at every class level, they have them different streams. I would ensure that every stream, depending on what stream you are, I would use different literacy strategies that would match their learning styles and their learning needs. What they need, so that they'll be able to take what is being taught to them in my content area. They'll be able to apply that in other content areas. So depending on what grade you're in, I'll employ different strategies to meet your needs according to your learning style or your learning ability. All right. So that's what I would do in terms of the relevancy of the learning strategies. All right. And so, like I said earlier, what I've learned from using Miyoshi and Tajani is that students comprehend at different levels. There's different levels of comprehension, and depending on what level you at, then you will be able to express yourself differently. And so what I'm learning, or what I've learned from the lesson, is it's important then that you identify the type of students that you have. You have to observe their behavior. You have to observe their demeanor, their body language. You have to observe how they conduct themselves. You have to observe. You have to take note of certain things that is going on around them, and the reason why you're doing that is not to judge them or prejudge them, is to get an understanding of where they act, so that you could meet their learning needs even better. Sometimes It isn't that a student is dumb. Sometimes it's the fact that the students just no teacher have ever took the time to try to teach them another way. Try to find another way for them to get the information, for them to understand. Sometimes it is be blockage. Sometimes they just don't. They're not motivated. Sometimes or you can find that sometimes they may be working, and so they're tired. They're physically tired. By the time they come to school, they're tired, and so all of these things, all of these factors plays a role in their literacy, their reading ability. So um, it's important, I think, us as teachers to take note of the type. We have to know our students, know what backgrounds they're from, so that we can better meet their needs. And I think that's a great implication in terms of literacy instruction, is the fact that we need to know our students. We need to know where they're coming from, what they're going through, so that we can meet their learning needs, as well as try to meet other needs that they may have, that we are able to help them to meet. And so my recommendation to um, teachers and principals, content areas, and Ministry of Education and School of Education and so forth, is really to look for ways to help students study. There are different schemas, like we covered in our textbook. There are different techniques we can use. We have graphic organizers that we can use to help students. We have reading strategies that we can use to help them to understand things better. We have the Friar model that we can use to present information so that they could understand it. We have open-ended, closed-ended, all of the things that the textbook talked about. We have the different techniques in a whole class novel, where the whole class studies a particular novel and gain certain information from that. So all of these things, all of these strategies can be used to enhance learning, and should be a critical part, or integral part of the whole learning experience for our students, no matter what subject area you may be from. And so that's my 5 cents on that. The use of video recording in teaching, I find that to be interesting, because it highlights, you get to see yourself in action, and you get to capture some stuff that you would not have necessarily captured in during the teaching lesson, in terms of the behavior of students. When you go back and you look at different behaviors, you look at some of the things that you may have done wrong. You look at your own behavior, your own response. Sometimes as teachers, we can be too soft or too hard on students, and so the recording, it what it does is it increases your awareness of your teaching. It also provides a record for you to fall back on, and so that in the future you can go back and say, okay, I could have worked on this better. I could have taught this better. Okay, maybe I didn't quite explain this concept better. And so the video recording, it helps you it helps as a form of record keeping, and it helps you to be accountable as a teacher, so you could go back and see, okay, did I meet my objectives? I said I wanted to meet A, B, and C. And even as I went back in my recordings, I noticed that, okay, I had certain objectives, but especially in my second lesson, one of the objectives I didn't even get to because of the length of the lesson. And so sometimes, being realistic, sometimes we have a lot of objectives that we want to meet all at once. and sometimes in a lesson we only meet one or two. We don't meet all, and so it's important. What I learned is important then to make sure that your objectives are realistic and that you allocate sufficient time to meet them. And of course, it's okay. You don't have to have a bunch of objectives and try to teach a bunch of things all at once. And so that's what I'm learning, especially from the video recording, going back and seeing the interaction. And it's also very rewarding at the end of the day when you get to look back and say, wow, I taught this lesson very well. I mean, the students really understood the concepts, and the students were well behaved, and this is the type of lesson that I want to teach. And so, when you're feeling discouraged, you can go back and you can view the recording. So the recording, it plays many roles. It enforces certain things. Um, you know, it brings out. You get to see it certain things that you could have worked on. It serves as a record keeping, and it holds you accountable for the objectives, for your goals that you said that you was going to meet during the lesson. Okay, so that is my view on the entire on the aspects of the recording. All right, and so I just like to say it was a good experience. EDU 436. It was a good experience. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the time that I spent, and I think I've actually come out of this class, a bit smarter, a bit better. I'm extremely more knowledgeable. My attitude toward literacy now has totally shifted. I have a better understanding, and I think there is a need now for more teachers to be, really, really trained in the area of literacy, so that they could understand, that, this applies basically to all the different content areas, and see the importance of literacy. So for me, I think this is most beneficial for me, and being able to teach my classmates was a good experience. Being able to present was a good experience. Being able to write, read, and all of that plays a role in terms of when you actually have to go out there and teach a lesson and teach others, that you'll be well equipped. You'll be well equipped to be able to really, really articulate the information, present the information in a way that students would understand. And so once again, it was a good experience. Overall, I enjoyed it. It's a lot of work. But however, they say hard work pays off at the end of the day. And so, of course, my name is Frankie Camille. I don't know if I introduced myself in the beginning of the lesson, but my name is Frankie Camille. EDU 436 student. And of course, it's Dr. Butler class, and this is my video documentary summarizing my lesson and concluding what I have learned from the class, and from doing the activity that was given to do. Okay, and of course, I came a long way in terms of literacy, because from grade 4, I repeated grade 4. I didn't always know how to read and write. I had trouble in school, but I had teachers that encouraged me, and I had teachers that pushed me, and I just kept going, and by the time I got to grade 12, I became the head boy of my school. I became the valedictorian, and it's the same person that couldn't read and couldn't write at first, but I kept persevering because of my teachers, and because I know that they believed in me, I kept pushing, I kept studying, I kept working hard. And so I think that is should be the goal of every teacher, to ensure that you encourage your students to go beyond, to push beyond, to be the best that they can be in every area, in every content area of their lives. And of course, being literate, being able to read, being able to write, being able to think critically, being able to make decisions, um, will impact your level of success in life. And so that's my contribution. And um, I thank you, Dr. Butler, for your hard work. And I pray your continued um, success in terms of um, being a forerunner, a nation builder in terms of teaching. So thank you.